The arrival of the storm came without warning. Ethan's small ship shook like a toy in the sky of an unknown world. Lightning cracked across the clouds and alarms screamed inside the cockpit. He pulled the controls hard, but the storm was stronger than him. The ship spun, fire lit the engine, and then everything went black. When Ethan woke, silence pressed against his ears. The ship was broken, lying in a swamp of mud and water. Smoke rose from the cracked hull. Sparks jumped from broken wires. His head ached and his arms were cut, but he was alive. That was enough. He pushed open the hatch and stepped outside. The air was heavy and warm, filled with the smell of wet plants and something sweet, almost like fruit. Strange trees grew high into the sky, their leaves glowing faint green as if carrying their own light. Insects buzzed with wings that shimmered like glass. The ground squished under his boots, soft and wet. Ethan looked around. His radio was dead. No signal reached him. He was alone. He knew nothing about this planet, nothing about its people or dangers. All he had was a broken blaster, a knife, and his training. The soldier in him wanted to start a camp, fix the radio, and wait. But something inside told him waiting was death. He had to move. He grabbed his bag, filled it with water packs and a few rations, and left the smoking wreck behind. The forest closed in quickly. Tall roots twisted like walls. Vines hung down like ropes. Every sound made him tense. A distant roar echoed through the trees, low and deep. Something big was out there. He walked carefully, scanning the shadows. He saw tracks in the mud, claw marks bigger than his hand. He crouched and touched them. Fresh. His chest grew tight, but he kept moving. Fear could not stop him. He was human. Hours seemed to pass as he pushed deeper into the glowing forest. Sweat dripped down his face. The air was thick, heavy, and alive with strange smells. Sometimes he thought he saw movement in the corner of his eye, but when he turned, there was nothing. Then, he heard it. A scream. It was sharp, high, and filled with fear. Not an animal cry. Not a beast, a voice. A living voice. Ethan froze, his heart pounding. He looked through the trees, and there it was again. A cry for help. Without thinking, his legs moved. He pushed through vines, mud flying under his boots. Branches scratched his arms, but he did not stop. The voice grew clearer. He could hear words now, though he did not understand the language. Still, fear and pain sounded the same in every tongue. He broke into a clearing. His eyes widened. In the middle of the open ground, a young alien girl stumbled on her knees. Her skin was pale silver, glowing faintly like the trees. Her hair was long, shining with a soft blue light. Her eyes, wide with terror, locked on the figures around her. Hunters. They wore black armor and masks that hid their faces. Their bows were pulled back, arrows glowing with sharp red energy. They circled her slowly, laughing in voices that sounded cold and cruel. The girl crawled backward, tears running down her glowing cheeks. Ethan's breath caught. He was an outsider here. This was not his fight. He could turn around and leave. But something inside his chest burned. The girl was helpless, and those hunters were ready to kill her. He could not stand by. He never had the hunters raise their bows. Arrows aimed at her heart. Ethan ran. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice breaking the still air. The hunters turned, but too late. Ethan dived forward, putting himself between the girl and the flying arrows. The air whistled, and then pain exploded in his shoulder as the first arrow hit. Another arrow scraped across his side. He groaned but stayed standing. His body blocked her completely. The alien girl gasped, eyes wide as she stared at the human bleeding for her. Ethan gritted his teeth and pulled out his broken blaster. It sparked but fired once, the shot slamming into a hunter's chest and throwing him back. The others growled, angry now. Ethan raised his knife in his other hand. His body trembled, blood dripping, but his voice was steady. "You want her?" he growled. "You go through me." The hunters hissed, arrows glowing brighter. The forest went silent, as if the world itself held its breath. The girl pressed against his back, shaking, her hand gripping his torn jacket. Ethan knew he was only one man far from home, already wounded. But he also knew this: humans never step back when someone needs saving. The first hunter screamed and raised his bow. Ethan tightened his grip, ready to face them all. The battle for survival had just begun. The arrows fly. The air cracked as the first arrow struck Ethan's shoulder. The force nearly spun him sideways, but he planted his boots in the wet earth and stood firm. Pain burned hot through his arm, but his body was already moving on instinct. The hunters hissed through their masks, surprised the human had not fallen. Their red glowing arrows had cut through beasts twice his size, yet this stranger still stood. For a moment they hesitated. Then 3 more raised their bows. Ethan lifted his broken blaster. The weapon sparked. The barrel half cracked, but he squeezed the trigger anyway. A weak blue bolt spat out, striking the ground near the hunters. Smoke hissed up, and the nearest warrior stepped back. It wasn't much, but it bought a second. Behind him, the alien girl whimpered. Ethan could feel her shaking. He spoke without looking at her, his voice low. "Stay behind me. Don't move." He gripped his knife tighter in his left hand. His right arm, the one with the arrow lodged deep, felt heavy and weak. He ignored it. Pain could wait. Survival could not. The hunters shouted something in their own tongue. Their voices were sharp, harsh, filled with hate. Then, like shadows, they moved. Arrows whistled through the air. Ethan ducked, dragging the girl with him. One arrow cut through his hair. Another buried itself in the tree behind them, glowing hot before fading. The smell of burned bark filled the clearing. He rolled to the side, pulling the girl with him just as another volley of arrows sliced through the space where they had stood. Mud splashed up, glowing red where the arrows landed. Ethan's mind raced. He was outnumbered. His weapon was almost useless. His body was bleeding. And yet some stubborn fire inside him refused to surrender. He had faced worse. Maybe not like this, but fear was the same everywhere. The hunters fanned out, circling them again. Their armor gleamed black, marked with strange red symbols. They moved like predators, confident and slow, savoring the kill. Ethan crouched, pushing the girl lower to the ground. "Stay low. When I move, you run." Her eyes widened. She shook her head quickly, silver hair glowing under the dim light. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear even in a tongue he didn't know. She was begging him not to leave her. He almost smiled. "Then we don't run," he said softly. "We fight." The hunters loosed another wave. Ethan shifted, dragging the girl behind a thick root. Arrows slammed into it, sparks spraying. One arrow cut across his leg, leaving a burning line of blood. He hissed through clenched teeth, but forced himself back up. He fired again. The blaster groaned, but spat one more weak bolt, hitting a hunter's mask. The creature screamed, clutching its face. The others roared in anger. Ethan used the moment. He charged forward, knife in hand. The hunters did not expect the human to run toward them. His blade slashed across the arm of one, sparks flying as steel cut into alien armor. The hunter staggered back. Another swung at him with a bow, the weapon doubling as a club. Ethan blocked with his bleeding arm, pain exploding, but he shoved his knife upward, jabbing into the gap of the armor. The hunter collapsed. For a second, victory tasted real. Then 3 more arrows flew. Ethan twisted, one arrow slicing across his ribs, another grazing his thigh. He stumbled, nearly falling. His vision blurred, but he forced his eyes open. If he fell, the girl would die. That thought kept him upright. The girl screamed again, but not in fear this time. Her hands glowed bright blue. A pulse of strange energy burst from her, throwing dust and leaves into the air. The hunter stepped back, surprised. Ethan blinked. He had no idea what she was or what power she carried. But for one moment, the hunters were not looking at him. He seized it. He lunged at the nearest one, slamming his shoulder into its chest. They crashed to the ground, rolling through the mud. Ethan stabbed again and again until the armor cracked. The hunter's red glow faded, but more were coming. Too many. Ethan pushed himself to his feet, chest heaving. Blood ran down his side, dripping into the dirt. He stood in front of the girl once more, knife raised, blaster sparking uselessly. His whole body screamed at him to stop, to collapse, but he refused. "You're not taking her," he said, his voice rough but steady. The hunters froze for a moment. Perhaps they understood his words, or perhaps they felt his defiance. Their bows lowered only slightly, as if even they questioned why a stranger would suffer so much for someone not his own. The girl pressed her hand to Ethan's back, her blue glow spreading into his wounds, easing the fire of pain for a moment. She whispered something, words soft and gentle, though he could not understand. The hunters raised their bows again. This time they would not hold back. Ethan braced himself, scars in the making already burning across his skin. If this was his last stand, he would make sure the girl lived to see another dawn. The arrows flew once more. The fight for survival. The clearing became fire and shadow as the arrows rained down. Ethan ducked, pulling the girl close. His knife felt small in his hand, almost useless against the storm, but he refused to let go. One arrow sliced across his shoulder. Another struck the ground so near his leg that the heat burned his skin. The hunters shouted to each other, their voices sharp like metal scraping stone. They wanted the girl alive, but they wanted him broken first. Ethan's body screamed with every movement. His wounds bled freely now, painting his torn jacket dark red. Still, he pushed forward, using the trees for cover. He moved fast, dragging the girl behind him, each step heavy with pain. The hunters followed. They spread out, flanking him like wolves. Their glowing arrows lit the forest with red flashes, chasing him through the undergrowth. "Run," Ethan muttered to the girl. His voice was rough, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Don't stop, no matter what." But the girl didn't let go of him. She shook her head, her blue-lit hair flying, refusing to leave. Her silver hands glowed again, ready to call that strange power. Ethan almost cursed. Brave but dangerous. If she wasted her strength too soon, they were both finished. They burst through a wall of vines into a narrow path. Roots coiled across the ground like giant snakes. Ethan stumbled once, caught himself, and pushed on. Behind, arrows thudded into the trees, each one burning like hot coals before fading. A hunter leapt from the shadows ahead, bow raised as a blade. Ethan reacted fast, slamming his shoulder into the armored chest. Pain exploded, but the move knocked the hunter off balance. Ethan's knife slashed once, twice, cutting through the straps of the alien's armor. The hunter fell back with a grunt. No time to finish him. More were coming. The girl cried out a warning. Ethan turned just as another hunter swung from the side, bow slicing like an axe. Ethan ducked, feeling the wind of the strike brush his hair. He stabbed upward, his knife scraping across the alien's mask. Sparks flew, and the hunter stumbled back, clutching his face. "Move," Ethan barked, pulling the girl deeper into the forest. The chase grew wilder. Branches whipped his face. Mud sucked at his boots, and the sound of hunters filled the air. Their footsteps were steady, strong, never slowing. They were built for this terrain. Ethan was not. His lungs burned. His vision blurred. Still, he refused to stop. He had one goal now: keep her alive. They reached a ridge. Below, a river glowed faint green, fast and rough, smashing against black rocks. Behind, the hunters closed in. Arrows hissed through the air. One grazed Ethan's ribs, spinning him forward. He gasped, nearly dropping to his knees. The girl grabbed his arm, her glow pulsing into his skin. Warmth spread through him, numbing the pain for a moment. He glanced at her, breath ragged. "You're saving me," he muttered. "But I'm supposed to save you." Her eyes, bright blue, full of fire, met his. She said something soft in her language, words he didn't understand, yet he felt their meaning. She trusted him. The hunters reached the ridge. Their masks shone red in the dark. They raised their bows together, ready to end it. Ethan made a choice. He grabbed the girl's hand. "Hold on," and he jumped. The river swallowed them in a roar. Water slammed against his body, cold and violent. The current dragged them under, spinning them like leaves in a storm. Ethan clutched the girl tight, fighting to reach the surface. His lungs screamed for air, but he kicked harder, refusing to let her go. They burst up, coughing, gasping. Waves crashed against them, pushing them downstream. The hunters shouted from above, their voices fading with distance. Arrows splashed into the river, glowing red before sinking. None hit. The current carried them far from the ridge. Ethan forced himself toward the shore, every muscle burning. Finally, he dragged the girl onto the mud. He collapsed beside her, chest heaving, vision darkening. For a long time, neither moved. Only the sound of the river filled the silence. Then, slowly, Ethan pushed himself up. His arms shook. His body felt like fire and stone. But he looked at the girl, checking if she was alive. She lay on her side, breathing fast, her silver skin bruised but unbroken. Relief washed over him. He let out a shaky laugh. "We're not dead." "That's something." The girl looked at him with wide eyes. She reached out, pressing her glowing hand to his chest. Energy flowed into him again, easing the pain. Not healing fully, but enough to keep him standing. Ethan nodded. "Thank you." But before he could say more, a sound broke the night. A horn, low, long, echoing through the forest. The hunters were calling more. Ethan's stomach sank. They had escaped the arrows, but the fight was not over. Not even close. He stood wobbling, gripping his knife again. His scars burned, his blood still flowed, but his will stayed unbroken. The girl rose beside him, her blue glow steady now, her eyes fierce. She was no longer just a victim. She was ready to fight too. Together, they turned toward the dark forest ahead. The hunters were coming. The survival of two strangers, human and alien, was only beginning. Beyond the forest was quiet again, but not in a safe way. It was the silence of predators hunting in the dark. Ethan's chest rose and fell like a hammer. Every wound screamed, but he forced himself to keep walking. He couldn't stop, not yet. Beside him, the alien girl moved with careful steps. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the night, and her blue hair shimmered like water under starlight. Even weak, she carried herself with strange grace. She glanced at Ethan often, her eyes full of concern. Finally, when the river sounds faded, they stopped. Ethan dropped against a large root, his back sliding down until he sat on the damp ground. His shirt was torn, soaked in blood. His knife hung loose in his hand, and his broken blaster was dead now, nothing but dead weight. The girl knelt in front of him. Her hands glowed as she touched his shoulder where the arrow had struck earlier. Ethan tensed, but then warmth spread through his body. The pain dulled, replaced by a calm heat. The bleeding slowed. He let out a shaky breath. You can heal." She tilted her head, not understanding his words, but she smiled softly. For a moment, in the middle of blood and fear, the world felt lighter. Ethan studied her face. She looked young, maybe no older than 20 in human years, but her eyes carried a weight, as if she had already lived through loss. She was not just someone running from hunters. She was something more. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, though he knew she couldn't answer in his tongue. Still, she tried. She pressed her hand against her chest and spoke. "Liara." Her voice was soft, musical yet firm. Ethan repeated it slowly. "Liara." Her smile grew wider. She touched his chest gently above his heart. "Ethan," he nodded. "Ethan." Their names crossed the barrier between their worlds. For the first time since the crash, he felt less alone. Liara sat closer, her glow keeping the shadows at bay. She began to speak, short words, gestures with her hands. Ethan didn't understand everything, but he caught pieces. She pointed to the hunter's direction, her face hard with anger. Then she touched her own chest, her eyes lowering with sorrow. Finally, she made the shape of a crown with her fingers. Ethan blinked. "A crown, a princess?" He looked at her again with new eyes. She wasn't just some girl in danger. She was someone important, maybe the last of her people, hunted because of who she was. "That's why they want you," Ethan muttered. "You're the key." Liara didn't understand his words, but she saw his expression. She nodded slowly, as if confirming his thought in her own way. Ethan leaned his head back against the root. The stars above were strange, bigger and brighter than Earth's sky. He wondered if anyone back home would ever know what he had done here. Probably not, but maybe that didn't matter. Right now, his purpose was clear. Keep Liara alive. For a while, silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of insects and the rustle of leaves. Then Liara began to hum softly. It wasn't a song Ethan knew, but it soothed him. Her voice was gentle, carrying notes that seemed older than the forest itself. His eyes grew heavy. He fought sleep, but exhaustion dragged him under. When he woke, dawn light filtered through the glowing trees. His wounds still hurt, but he could move without falling. Liara was awake already, kneeling by the river's edge, her hands cupped in the water. She whispered something to the stream, almost like a prayer. Ethan rose carefully. His muscles protested, but he forced them to obey. "We have to move," he said, even though she wouldn't understand. He pointed toward the forest. "Hunters." Liara looked at him, then nodded. She came to him and placed her glowing hand on his arm. The warmth spread again, giving him strength. He realized she was using her energy on him, even though it weakened her. "Why?" he asked softly, staring at her. "Why risk yourself for me?" Liara's answer was simple. She placed her hand on her chest, then on his. 2 worlds, 2 lives, but 1 bond. Ethan's throat tightened. He wasn't sure if he deserved her trust, but he knew he would never betray it. They moved again, deeper into the jungle. The path grew harder, vines clawing at their legs, thorns cutting skin. Strange creatures watched from the branches, eyes glowing, but none attacked. Perhaps they sensed Liara's power, or perhaps they feared Ethan's defiance. As they walked, Ethan noticed how Liara stayed close, sometimes brushing against his arm, as if she feared losing him in the shadows. She whispered his name once. "Ethan." And it struck him harder than any arrow. It wasn't just survival anymore. Something was forming between them. A bond built in blood, fear, and trust. But before he could think more, a new sound reached them. Drums. Far in the distance, low and steady, echoing through the trees. The hunters were not finished. They were calling others. Ethan gripped his knife tighter. He glanced at Liara, who met his eyes with calm strength. The bond they shared was no longer just about survival. It was about standing together no matter how many scars it would take. And Ethan knew one thing with certainty. He would bleed for her again. The enemy strikes back. The drums grew louder as the sun climbed higher. Each beat rolled through the forest like the heartbeat of some dark beast. Ethan moved quickly, guiding Liara through the thick undergrowth. His knife was still his only weapon, his broken blaster dead weight on his hip. Every sound made his grip tighten. Liara stayed close to him, her glowing skin dimmed now, her energy clearly fading. She tried to keep up, but her steps grew slower, and Ethan could see the strain in her eyes. "We don't stop," Ethan muttered, more to himself than to her. "If we stop, they'll catch us." But the hunters were not far behind. Ethan could hear them sometimes. Cracks of branches, the faint whistle of arrows flying overhead to scare them, the cruel laughter of masked voices. They weren't just hunting. They were enjoying it. Ethan's jaw clenched. He had been prey before in wars, ambushed, trapped. He knew this game. The hunters wanted to break their spirit before killing. Not this time. They came to a ravine. The ground split open, wide and deep with only a fallen log bridging the gap. The river below roared like thunder. Ethan checked it fast. The log looked old, cracked, but strong enough for one at a time. He turned to Liara. "Go." She looked at him, hesitant, eyes flicking between him and the log. Her hand gripped his sleeve as if she didn't want to move without him. "I'll be right behind you," Ethan said firmly. He gestured to the bridge. "Go." At last she nodded. Light glowed faintly under her feet as she stepped onto the log. She moved carefully, her arms out for balance. Then the hunters arrived. From the trees behind, 3 masked figures appeared, bows raised, red arrows glowing bright. Their leader stepped forward, armor marked with more symbols than the others. His mask gleamed like polished stone, and his voice boomed through the clearing. He shouted something, words Ethan didn't understand. But the meaning was clear: surrender the girl or die. Ethan raised his knife. His body ached, his scars burned, but his voice came out strong. "If you want her, you'll have to cut me down first." The leader tilted his head, almost curious. Then he gestured. 2 hunters moved to flank, spreading wide, cutting off the escape. Ethan cursed under his breath. He had to buy Liara time. He charged. The hunters did not expect him to run straight at them. His knife flashed, slicing across the bowstring of the first attacker. The alien roared in anger as the weapon snapped. Ethan spun, slamming his shoulder into the second hunter. Pain flared through his ribs, but the enemy stumbled back. An arrow whistled past his head, close enough to burn the air. Ethan ducked low, grabbed a handful of dirt, and threw it into the leader's mask. The hunter hissed, blinded for a moment. Ethan used every second. He stabbed, slashed, kicked, raw survival, not clean fighting. His body moved with desperate fury, but the hunters were strong. One caught his arm, twisting it painfully. Another struck his back, sending him to his knees. His vision blurred, stars flashing behind his eyes. From the log, Liara screamed his name. Her glow flared bright, her hands rising. Blue energy pulsed out, slamming into the hunters like a wave. They staggered back, armor sparking. The leader shouted angrily, pointing at her. Ethan forced himself up, blood dripping from his lip. "No," he growled. "You don't touch her." With the last of his strength, he tackled the nearest hunter, driving them both into the mud. His knife found a weak spot between armor plates. The hunter stiffened, then fell still, but now arrows rained again. Ethan grabbed his knife free and ran for the log. "Liara, go!" he shouted. She reached the far side, her eyes wide with fear and fire. She held out her glowing hands as if to pull him across with sheer will. Ethan sprinted onto the log. Arrows slammed into the wood, cracking it. One arrow grazed his leg, nearly knocking him off. He staggered, arms out, but kept moving. Behind him, the leader roared, charging onto the log as well. The weight shook it. The old wood groaned, splitting under them. Ethan turned. The leader was close, mask gleaming red. Ethan's knife was slick with blood, his hands trembling. But he raised it anyway. For a heartbeat, the two faced each other on the narrow bridge. Death yawning below. Then the log snapped. The world fell away. Ethan crashed into the river again, water smashing the air from his lungs. He twisted, searching for Liara. Above, he saw her glowing figure reaching toward him, her voice crying out, but the current dragged him under. The last thing he saw before darkness was the leader falling too, mask still glowing red as he vanished into the river's fury. When Ethan washed up on the shore, coughing and broken, Liara was there. She dragged him out with all her strength, her hands glowing desperately to heal him. Tears streaked her glowing cheeks, but she refused to let go. Ethan's chest rose and fell weakly, but his eyes opened. He gave a faint smile even as pain racked his body. "Still here," he whispered. Liara pressed her forehead against his, whispering words he couldn't understand but could feel in his heart. Words of trust. Words of promise. The hunters had struck hard. They would strike again. But Ethan knew this. No matter how many scars it cost him, he would not let them win. The war for survival was far from over. The final stand. The forest opened to stone. Ethan limped into a wide clearing where broken towers rose from the ground like the bones of giants. The air was heavy here, colder as if the ruins still carried the weight of ages long past. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the cracked walls, whispering of power that did not belong to men. Liara walked at his side, her glow brighter now, reacting to the ruins. She touched the stone gently, and the markings lit up under her fingers. She whispered something in her language, words filled with reverence and sorrow. "This is where you were trying to go," Ethan said softly, though she could not understand. "This place, it matters, but they were not alone." The hunters' drums thundered closer. Masked figures emerged from the trees, forming a circle around the clearing. Their leader stepped forward, armor darker than the rest, his mask still glowing faint red. Somehow he had survived the river. His voice boomed, cruel and sharp, filling the air with authority. Liara stiffened, her hand clutching Ethan's torn sleeve. He squeezed her hand once, steady and firm. "This ends here." Ethan staggered to the center of the clearing. Every scar burned. His leg barely held him, his arm throbbed with pain, and his knife felt more like a burden than a weapon, but his eyes never wavered. He was human, and humans didn't bow. The leader raised his hand. The hunters pulled back their bows, arrows glowing crimson. The air itself seemed to hum with death. Ethan stood tall. "If you want her," he shouted, "then you'll have to kill me first." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the arrows flew. Ethan dove forward, rolling across the cracked stone. Arrows struck where he had stood, shattering against the ancient ruins. He pushed himself up, charging at the nearest hunter. His knife slashed once, finding a weak joint in the armor. The alien fell, shrieking. Another arrow grazed his arm. He stumbled, but Liara lifted her hands, releasing a burst of blue energy. The wave rippled across the clearing, knocking 3 hunters back. The ruins glowed brighter in response, as if answering her power. The leader roared in anger. He charged at Ethan, swinging a long blade that pulsed with red light. Ethan barely blocked with his knife, the impact sending shocks up his arm. Sparks flew as human steel clashed with alien energy. The fight was brutal. Ethan was slower, weaker, but he used every scrap of training. He ducked, shoved, countered. His scars bled fresh, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Liara ran to the center of the ruins, placing her hands on the ancient altar. Symbols flared to life, spreading across the stones. The ground trembled. She cried out, her voice ringing like a song. Awakening something buried deep, the hunters noticed. They turned from Ethan, aiming their arrows at her. "No," Ethan shouted. He lunged into their line, taking the shots meant for her. One arrow slammed into his chest, another into his side. The force dropped him to his knees. Blood filled his mouth, but he forced his body upright, spreading his arms wide. "You don't touch her," he rasped. "Not while I breathe," the leader snarled, raising his blade for the final strike. And then the ruins answered. Liara's body shone like a star. Blue light surged from the altar, rushing into the stones, the ground, the sky. The hunters screamed as the energy exploded outward, tearing through their ranks. Armor cracked, masks shattered, arrows turned to ash. The leader staggered, his blade shattering in his hand. He reached for Liara one last time, before the light consumed him. His scream echoed, then vanished into silence. The clearing fell still. Only the hum of the ruins remained, glowing brighter than ever. Ethan collapsed to the ground, his body broken, arrows still deep in his flesh. His vision blurred, but he saw Liara rushing to him. Her glow dimmed as she knelt, pressing her hands to his wounds. Tears streamed down her silver cheeks. "Ethan," she whispered desperately. He coughed, a weak smile crossing his bloodied face. "Told you, I'd protect you." Her power poured into him, warm and gentle, closing the worst of the wounds. But even as she worked, scars formed across his skin, deep, jagged, permanent. When the light finally faded, Ethan lay on the stone floor, alive, but marked forever. Liara leaned over him, her forehead touching his, her voice soft. He didn't understand her words, but he didn't need to. He had won. She was safe. And for him, that was enough. But deep inside, Ethan knew one thing. This was not the end. The hunters would return. The scars on his body were proof of the battle, and a promise of the war still to come. The reward worth every scar. The battle was over, but the silence was heavy. Smoke drifted through the ruins, carrying the scent of ash and burned earth. Broken armor and shattered masks littered the ground. The hunters were gone, destroyed by the light that Liara had unleashed. Ethan lay on the cold stone, every breath sharp and painful. His body was covered in blood and dust. The arrows had been pulled free, but their wounds left scars that carved deep across his skin. Each mark burned as if branded by fire. Liara knelt beside him. Her hands glowed faintly, trying to heal what she could, but her strength was fading. She had given too much of herself to awaken the ruins. Still, she pressed on, whispering his name again and again. Ethan. His eyes fluttered open. The world around him blurred, but her face was clear. Silver skin glowing, blue hair falling like light around her shoulders, tears shining in her bright eyes. You're safe, Ethan whispered, his voice rough and broken. That's all that matters. Liara shook her head quickly. She pressed her glowing hands harder against his chest as if refusing to let him slip away. Words in her language poured out, soft but urgent. He didn't know them, but he felt their meaning. You saved me. Now I save you. The glow spread deeper this time. His pain dulled, his bleeding slowed. Yet not all wounds closed. Where arrows had pierced him, scars remained, glowing faintly with her light. They were marks of what he had endured. Ethan looked down at them with a faint smile. Guess I'll carry pieces of you now, he muttered. Liara tilted her head, not understanding, but her smile returned anyway. She brushed her fingers over one scar gently, like a treasure instead of a wound. The ruins responded to her presence. As the sun rose, the cracked stones shone brighter. Pillars of blue light reached skyward, cutting through the forest canopy. The ground trembled, alive with ancient energy. Liara stood slowly, her figure outlined in the glow. She looked at Ethan, her voice soft but strong. She spoke words in her tongue, but this time the ruins seemed to translate. Her voice echoed in his mind in plain, simple English. You are not only human. You are chosen. Ethan blinked, stunned. Chosen? Me? Liara nodded, her expression calm but serious. You carried pain for me. You gave your body, your blood. The ruins accept you, my people. Will accept you, he almost laughed. A soldier, a broken man far from home, now marked by alien light. But when he saw her eyes, he understood. This was no joke. He had become part of something greater than himself. The ruins' energy wrapped around him, seeping into his scars. They pulsed once, then settled into glowing patterns, almost like armor etched into his skin. He flexed his hand. Strength returned, not complete but stronger than before. The reward was not gold nor power alone. It was survival, trust, and a bond forged in fire. Liara helped him stand. He leaned on her. Though his body felt lighter than it had minutes before, they stepped together through the glowing ruins, past broken hunters and shattered weapons. For the first time since the crash, Ethan felt the smallest spark of hope. At the center of the ruins stood a tall stone gate. Symbols blazed across its surface, bright enough to hurt the eyes. Liara touched it gently, and the gate opened, revealing a path beyond, a hidden valley filled with blue light and distant towers. Ethan stared in awe. A hidden kingdom, alive and untouched. Her home. Liara looked back at him, her face softer now. She reached for his scarred hand, holding it firmly. With me, she whispered. He nodded. With you. They stepped into the valley together. As they walked, Ethan noticed something strange. Wherever Liara went, life bloomed, flowers glowing brighter, water running clearer. And wherever he walked, his scars answered, glowing faintly, as if the ruins themselves had made him part of this world. The hunters would return someday. He knew that. But he also knew he wouldn't face them alone. He had Liara, and through her he had a people who would stand with him. That night they camped in the valley. The stars above were sharper, brighter than he had ever seen. Ethan lay back against the grass, staring up. Liara sat beside him, humming the same soft song she had sung in the forest. For the first time in years he felt peace. He touched one of his scars, tracing it gently. The pain was gone now, replaced by warmth. He smiled. "Worth it," he whispered. Liara leaned closer, resting her head against his shoulder. She didn't know the word, but she felt the meaning. She closed her eyes, whispering softly, "Aethon." And under alien stars, with scars that shone like metals, Ethan finally understood the truth. Every wound, every drop of blood, every scar had been the price of something greater. The reward was not just survival. It was trust. It was belonging. It was her.